Good morning. For those of you who weren't here at the beginning, my name is John Morris, CEO of 17 Asset Management. I have the pleasure of moderating this session on investment approaches in the agri-food space in the Caribbean. I'd like to give a brief introduction of our esteemed panelists and dig into the discussion, which is so important and really the theme of this overall conference on investment into the Caribbean agricultural segment. First, it is a pleasure to introduce Dr. Patrick Antoine. He is the CEO of the CARICOM Private Sector Organization, CPSO. Dr. Antoine is a renowned intellectual regional thinker and has been acted as both an economist, a consultant, an operator, and a negotiator for endless initiatives over his career throughout not just the Caribbean, but Latin America and Africa. In the role that he is playing, it's a membership organization really representing the private sector and looking to mobilize private sector participation. And that's so consistent with what this event is all about. So Dr. Patrick, welcome, and thank you for being part of this panel. Additionally, it gives me pleasure to introduce Monica Navarrete. She's calling in from Honduras at the moment. She's the Senior Investment Officer at Inter-American Development Bank. She's been in banking for over 17 years in the Caribbean and Latin American region, particularly in agribusiness, energy, manufacturing, and financial institutions. As a Senior Investment Officer at IDB Invest, she's looking at the creative approaches of origination and structuring transactions, and she has closed almost 30 transactions and supervised another 25 in the region. Studying systems engineering and getting her MBA from Thunderbird in Arizona in the US. Monica, thank you very much for joining us today on the panel. Stephen Grell, Managing Director at Republic Bank in Guyana. He was appointed to this position in 2021. I have seen his name on multiple activities in the region. He is quickly becoming quite the regional banker. He left, or his previous organization was a small little company, I think, called Citibank. And now he is helping the largest public Caribbean-wide institution in its approach to banking in the region. So, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, John, for having me.
So let's start just with a round of questions, the same question to each of you. And we'll do a couple of those. Maybe take a few minutes to answer, but how would you describe the key activities of your organization? What purpose does it have? We'll go in the same route that I introduced you. If you would take that on, Dr. Antoine, I'd appreciate it.
So thank you, John, and colleagues on the panel and those who have joined us. Want to bring you the greetings of our executive committee of the CARICOM Private Sector Organization. We were formed just before the pandemic. We were not formed as a result of the pandemic, but just before, when the tourism statistics in the region in 2019 shot up, and with it, the food import bill of CARICOM countries really did in fact shock heads, and particularly those that were ministers of finance. In 2020, we received the mandate from heads to establish as a representative private sector organization covering the entire spectrum of the private sector, which from the onset, I want to say comprises between 50 and 60% small and micro firms. So that we have configured ourselves, particularly from the beginning, to be an organization that caters to small and micro firms, as well as the medium and the what we call large firms, including the conglomerates. Our mandate really is to contribute fully to the achievement of the objectives of the CARICOM single market and economy. And that puts us smack bam in the middle of this discussion, because at the end of the day, really the private sector are the entities that take the risk, that will in fact make the investment, that create the jobs and economic activity. And we do that in partnership with the policy space that the governments in fact create. And on this occasion, the heads thought it fit to bring the private sector into the room for the first time, I want to say, in several decades, so that we can assist in pointing to where rulemaking is important for private sector activity. 6 really key areas that we engaged in: trade in goods. How do we facilitate intra-regional trade in the first instance? But secondly, often misunderstood, how do we use the CSME and CARICOM countries, once we create the scale, as a springboard to connecting with global value chains and global markets? So the CSME is not just an end in itself. It is, in fact, has a second arm, which is connecting to global value chains. The second area, very quickly, is how we facilitate the freedom of movement of labor across the member states of the CSME. And although we say that we have many community member states that are not members of the CSME that also work with us in ensuring that they too participate in this whole issue of freedom of movement. Thirdly, how do we deal with the issue of capital and finance market integration? Again, very germane to the discussion today. Fourthly, I want to talk about this area called doing business. And under that, I want to talk to the area of expanding the agri-food value chains and the 25 by 25, which we'll talk a lot about. And also, my fifth emphasis would be on enabling business environment. How do we put all of those things that will cause all of these wonderful opportunities to be taken up by the private sector? And more recently, coming out of the devastation of the earthquake in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we were brought into the room by the CARICOM institutions and the private sector to participate in a 6th area. And this 6th pillar is disaster risk reduction and recovery. So we're also involved in that, in bringing the full might of the private sector to these important things that are taking place in the CSME. Thanks so much for having us.
Amazing, fantastic. Over to you, Monica. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this panel. IDB Invest is a member of the Inter-American Development Bank Group. It's a multilateral development bank committed to the economic development of its member countries in Latin America and the Caribbean through the private sector. That includes corporate financing directly corporates, financial institutions, and infrastructure projects. IDB Invest finances sustainable companies and projects that can achieve financial results and maximize the region's economic, social, and environmental development. As of year-end 2022, IDB Invest had more than $16 billion in assets under management, with more than 400 projects in portfolio. These projects have supported the creation of more than 500,000 jobs, reduced per year more than 12 million tons of CO2, and financed more than 2 billion MSMEs. And as a multilateral bank, we are interested in the business, but also in the impact those businesses bring. So IDB Invest Value Added relies in several factors, including the regional knowledge, sector expertise, customized financial solutions, because we're not we do the financial solutions are ad hoc for clients. We access other funding resources that we mobilize to. We have advisory capabilities, social and environmental value creation, and then we have a public-private dialogue, since we also have IDB within the public sector too, that services the public sector. IDB Invest has been awarded many recognitions over the years, including Multilateral Development Bank of the Year for several years now. IDB Invest food and agribusiness strategy aims to promote competitiveness by fostering food production efficiency and maximization of to secure global food security. And then it supports climate change adaptation and resilience, corporate governance practices, and social and environmental responsibility to secure the private sector's long-term benefit. On the other hand, it also promotes inclusion by integrating small farmers into the global agricultural and food value chain with an inclusive approach that considers gender and diversity. IDB Invest offers customized solutions to meet our clients' needs. We target blended, value-added financial and non-financial products and services to assist our clients to achieve long-term sustainability. We have financial products from short-term loans to long-term loans, and then guarantees that include credit guarantees or enhancements in capital markets. We also have a small amount of equity and mezzanine investments within the range of products that we offer. In terms of financial solutions, we have trade and supply chain financing products. On the other hand, we do capital markets instruments and structured financing. And then we have blended finance access, where we mix IDB Invest funds with concessional resources that have blended terms for our clients. We also mobilize other types of resources from impact funds, commercial banks, and whatever a project requires. On the other hand, we have advisory services, which we put together in bigger themes such as gender, diversity, and inclusion. We have technology and innovation for digital transformation that is very important to enhance productivity and efficiency. Then there's another one, climate change, as I mentioned before. Then we have MSMEs and sustainability to promote the value chain within anchor companies. And then we also support the corporate governance that gives the long-term sustainability of companies. So thank you.
Well, Monica, it sounds like you can invest in all of the issues. That was a great description, but I think, we can just drop the mic and we can go home, because IDB Invest clearly can fund everything in the region. Now, maybe we'll unwind that in a little bit, but it is so impressive, the range of tools that you have, and also the commitment to purpose and inclusion that you have, and the hard work that goes into it. And thank you. That was a great description. Let's now pass it to that greedy, totally private banker, and what Republic does for profit in the region.
Thank you again, John. Thank you for having me. And I'm a pleasure to be here with Monica and Dr. Antoine. So you started off by saying the purpose. I think it's such an instrumental part, particularly on this conversation of food security, and by extension other issues that are facing the CARICOM. And from that, it's key for me to say Republic Financial's Holdings Declaration of Purpose, where we value people, we serve with heart, we're deeply committed to your success, we care. And that is so important, because when you look at the initiatives and the commitment we've made, so we've done the 100 million, we made $100 million commitment to sustainable agriculture. We were the first indigenous bank to sign up for the Net Zero Banking Alliance, we've committed $200 million to climate initiatives. And why all of this? Because Republic Bank is a Caribbean bank. We are here. We have to understand the issues. We have to be a part of the solutions. So yes, we are a full service bank. We offer everything from capital market solutions. We're the leading institution for developing capital market solutions in the region. And we offer a full suite of products all the way down to the basic checking account and also to the digital wallets for some of the tech savvy of some of the underbanked areas. And why is that key? Is because the region faces a myriad of problems, and there's a need for a number of solutions across each segment within agriculture and within climate sustainability. I know we're focused on agriculture, but the conversation about climate cannot go away, because for sustainable agriculture, we need climate initiatives, right? They go. I see them as hand in hand almost, and we see them as such in Republic. So we are here to understand the problems, work with each segment of our customer base and our stakeholder base, and try and drive at getting the right solutions that have the right benefits. I think we've all been around banking for some time, and I think we've found historically some of the solutions that we've come up with really have not driven the benefit that we want. And why is that? Have we taken the time to understand where the crux of the problem is? And I think these types of conferences, these types of open discussions, getting Dr. Antoine's organization in the room with the leaders, getting the private sector involved, certainly helps to that. And Republic Bank, obviously, it wants to be a leading part of it. We have been a leading part of it throughout the years, and we continue to evolve and continue to try and contribute to those initiatives.
Fantastic. The having the three of you on this panel is really to let the audience see three leaders that organizations that are committed to the region. While it might sound that the three of your organizations, by working together, could fund everything, I think the Sustainable Development Goals were a discussion of the world to say governments alone cannot achieve the conditions that we all want for our grandchildren in the kind of world we want, in particular in the Caribbean. And I think even you all alone cannot achieve the funding needs that the Caribbean has. But you are working with organizations, and you are making investments that you feel good about. So I'd like to turn the question around, and I hope the audience is thinking, how could they partner with CPSO? How could they partner with IDB Invest? How could they partner with Republic? But I think there needs to be more players with capital and with private enterprise at the table. And I also think we've heard so far that a good portion of this is small businesses. While there are a lot of large businesses, it is a fragmented region. And so there might need to be more creativity when approaching this market. So let's turn away. Now the audience has a feeling of what you all do. Now let's turn to the opportunity of the agricultural opportunity in the region. And from each of your perspectives, what does you or your organization see as some of the opportunities that one should be focused on if you're not from the Caribbean and you're looking to come from the outside? And we'll go in reverse. Steve, maybe we can start with you with your perspective.
Sure. So I think if we look across the value chain, right, I think there is a number of key investment opportunities. I think from an investor standpoint, there are return metrics that match developing nations, and with key markets available, and particularly around areas of high value crops, utilizing technology to manufacture close to source. So the farm to table idea is catching on and is growing. So we're seeing that as a key area. We're seeing that one of the largest consumers in the region, which being the tourism sector, valuing this organic close to source production. And that is gaining traction. From an investor standpoint, there is a big gap and need for equity investors who can bring real experience. If you look across the banking landscape, the region has probably about less than 50% loan to deposit ratios. All right. So you think then bankable projects, there is senior secured debt available for it. All right. So you think so what's missing then to get some of these off the ground? And it's probably on the equity side. So you want committed investors who can bring value and bring experience to then that can drive projects at the medium to large scale. They will see sustainable returns. On the other side, I think there is a real opportunity for entrepreneurs to see how they fit in to this growing value chain. So are they going to provide transportation? And the president of Guyana spoke about the needs for improvement in transportation. But that's not only into Caribbean; it's also inter-country. There is a need to improve logistics within the country. So the logistics aspect of whether it be warehousing, whether it be getting product outside of the production zones into areas where they can be then distributed to higher value markets, we see as a key area for development and a key opportunity, a key growth.
Excellent. I would love for you to add to that, Monica, your perspective.
Yes, perfect. Actually, what we see within the region for food and agribusiness is mainly related to food security. But food security in an ample sense where there's availability, there's a supply of food that may be provided through national production or international trade. So projects related to the agribusiness sector to boost production and also productivity within a local level, and at the same time facilitate food trade. And then on the other hand, access to it. So referring to the ability of households to obtain food. What projects increase income, generate household purchasing power, and then boost household own consumption through greater agricultural production. And then on the other hand, utilization, how food quality required to achieve adequate nutritional status. Projects to raise the nutritious levels of the population, food quality or food safety, that would include also the access to water. And then the stability of having continuous access to food needed to always have a nutritious diet. So projects that make agribusiness production less vulnerable to climate change, natural disasters, and how to mitigate price fluctuations. So projects that involve all of that entails food security. We understand that there are some challenges within the region that can also become opportunities for investment, and that include, for example, the competitiveness, the scale, and the climate within the region. Then the effects of climate change and natural disasters that are prone to the region, access to finance because of the perceived high risk within the region. And then there are smaller domestic markets, so you need to do more with less land, less resources. So that needs to be tackled within projects. And then a more efficient use of infrastructure and logistics to be able to be competitive, to add to that. And then we also understand that there's a lack of risk management instruments that can be embedded within projects, within the structuring of projects, and also a higher use of technological solutions that add to the productivity or efficiency or enhancement of whatever is being done.
Great. Thank you. From operating businesses on the ground, Dr. Antoine, what are you seeing as opportunities for investors to be thinking about in the agri-food segment?
So thanks a lot. And I certainly want to align with a number of the comments and the suggestions from Stephen Grell on the infrastructure side. And one of the things that the executive committee of the CPSO insisted on when we huddled and accepted the mandate from prime ministers is that this must be evidence-driven. All our interventions must be evidence-driven. We have to step away from some of some of the sort of editorial and journalistic submissions about our region, and really let the data speak to us before we actually start speaking to heads about the way that we saw this community. And if there's one thing I want to say is that the executive committee, which are made up of executives and CEOs and chairmen that actually engage in trade and take risk, they are bullish about CARICOM. Let me repeat that they are bullish about CARICOM. And they're bullish about CARICOM because looking at sort of 9 criteria that they insisted that we use in identifying where we saw the opportunities coming from us, not coming from government, but coming from the private sector. And those 9 priorities include some of the things that we've heard from Monica and a number of the issues that we've heard from Stephen in terms of the importance of the climate and the climate consideration. So it includes things like the size of the domestic markets, the technology, the ability to meet private sector demand for quality, convenience. We've looked at all of those. There are 9 criteria, not just one. In those who haven't read the 25 by 25 document think it's just about looking at what the trade statistics says. No, we looked at 9 criteria in coming up with these opportunities. And the other thing we found is that the opportunities exist in a number of areas, but there are a number of, let me just say, impediments which we need to transcend. There are a number of factors that once we address them, and many of them they're not monumental, they're not Herculean, but we need to be able to focus and address these if we are to in fact achieve the opportunities that exist. So we found that they're looking at all of the criteria in cereals and staples, and in this we included root crops. I heard the president talk earlier and also the Minister of Agriculture from Jamaica. We found that looking at the trade statistics, just the trade statistics along with the criteria, that there was $324 million worth of opportunity for us to go after. We can't achieve all of it, but that's significant by any measure. And that's not counting the opportunities on the what we call cereals and staples side in the export markets, so that the export markets for yam and sweet potatoes and many of the things that we grow in CARICOM, where we are finding that we now have insufficient for ourselves, the export markets are demanding. Massive opportunity there in a CARICOM food import bill at the time that we measured to be just under 5 billion. Don't get caught up on the statistics. The president told you 6. Again, it depends on what you're measuring and what year. So let's say between $5 and $6 million, you're talking about $325 million in opportunities in one cluster. And again, what we've done is that we have the products which fall under this cluster. In meat products, including poultry, and I know that there's a lot of concern about the price of poultry in CARICOM, but we could bring the prices down if we were to do one thing: deal with the issue of the availability and the cost of feed. And we have all the land, we have all the people, we have the technology that exists in Brazil, in Africa, in other places to do this. And we continue to complain about there being challenges without recognizing that there are opportunities. But yes, you have to expend some effort. We have to have entrepreneurship, and we have to be able to put the factors that are the impediments before us and deal with them to achieve the opportunities. For poultry, where, for instance, the country that is most competitive in CARICOM is Belize, we're finding that there's just looking at the import statistics and without taking the export markets into account, nearly $320 million worth of opportunity. $320 million. We start looking at things such as edible vegetables, and I heard again the president mention that, and Minister Green from Jamaica, $200 million. We start looking at beverages, and we have again a listing of what we're talking about, not just again coming from a journalist report, but from the data, the statistics, looking at what we produce, looking at all of the considerations we have. We're talking about another $125 million. So for us, fish, I mean, it is really a travesty that for a region that really are predominantly island states and then countries that are on the continental shelf, which means that there's a lot of natural resources for fish stock, that we are talking about importing $90 million worth of canned fish and salted fish. When we have in the region now, thankfully, there's a project now being developed to displace that. We are talking about opportunities here without talking about export markets. We're talking about $80-something million. I'm saying this to you today. I've not listed for you turmeric. I've not listed ginger. I've not listed coffee. I've not listed nutmeg. I've not listed golden apples. I've not listed soursop. I've not listed any of these. I'm saying to you today that the opportunities that we have in CARICOM, located just south of the United States, their third border, and with the agreements the president wisely spoke about with the European community, and now with the UK, the opportunities in CARICOM for agribusiness is absolutely amazing. But you know what it's going to take? It's going to take effort. It's going to take entrepreneurship. Monica, it's going to take us generating the right incentives. And talking about the credit side, both Monica and Stephen. Monica, your IDB study is telling us that the credit gap, even with the resources, if you were to put them together, in CARICOM particularly, looking at the micro and small enterprises, that the credit gap is substantial. So we have to find a way, and I'm happy about what you said, Monica, about the IDB essentially tailoring a number of the financial solutions to deal with the opportunities. We have to find a way, and we said this to Stephen Grell before, to go down market to deal with those who are challenged because their own circumstance, their asset holdings, their own wealth portfolio doesn't match identically with what some of the financial instruments are. So I'm saying that without getting into other parts of our discussion this morning, saying that the opportunities are amazing. And there's an amazing number of CARICOM nationals who are doing things, but they're challenged for one reason or the other because they aren't able to surmount the small impediments that separate them from success. And John, that's really where I think this whole forum comes in. Yes? Yeah. Thank you.
No, it's Dr. Antoine, it's very exciting. Thank you for that. It takes me back to my first 25 years in my career in a firm that I love called Merrill Lynch. And it has a saying that I just have to respond after hearing you talk. After hearing you talk, I am bullish on the Caribbean. That sign of the bull was a sign, its name was courage, and it was a sign of optimism. And the bull is a sign of a market going up. So you paint a picture of opportunity versus small little impediments. And within that frame, I just like to point out to so many banks in the region. I look at some of the large banks and I call the Caribbean because it's always Latin America and the Caribbean. I mean, the Caribbean is earlier, with a C, and Latin America is with an L. So why isn't it Caribbean and Latin America? Why don't they do it in alphabetical order? Or why is it and? And the opportunity for the world to get behind the Caribbean with the right type of capital is enormous. Watching the commitment of Republic, and I'm going to some of the questions I'm going to ask you all to pick up some of the questions in the chat as well. But I'd love to hear, Republic is clearly a tremendous success, and they are committed to the Caribbean. And so much so that they're putting big pools of capital around purpose, whether the SDGs or climate or food. So I'd just like to ask you, Stephen, what is the approach you make investments? So the people out there and asking questions, they know what is the right way to approach. What do you do? What don't you do? And there's a few questions about ESG. Do you consider ESG factors and so forth with Republic? So why don't you just take on some of those, then we'll ask some of the similar things to Monica. So people are asking about also small, early stage and so forth. So give people an idea of what they should call Republic about, what they shouldn't, because it's not. There's other types that should do that.
So well, okay. From let's again start from that question and go backwards in sort of trades. So I think calling on Republic, I think there's always a need to call into your banker, particularly a banker that is based in the Caribbean, and that understands and has been here for over 100 years, right? So we are. It's the call into the banker should be from a starting point of, you have a business idea, all right, let's work through how we can assist. And assisting may not only be on credit, right? It can be in a number of other products that will help you become more efficient and also work and also even form more partnerships. We work closely with the CPSO to introduce entrepreneurs across borders. So there's also that, right? Not to be distracted. So, and then the main thing obviously is credit, right? So we have to be circumspect when we talk about financing in the Caribbean, and particularly bank financing. The Caribbean is a small financial landscape, and I say relatively small to your New Yorks and your European markets, right? So when you look across the landscape, you see you have banks who are overnight deposit taking institutions, right? So they are fundamentally going to sit on the senior secured level. And then you look across, you have your longer term investors who are going to come in for some of the longer tail transactions. And then you're sort of stuck. There's not many players that fill in the mezzanine area or the quasi debt equity area, whereby we get a lot of complaints or comparisons from persons coming to seek financing in the Caribbean. And they struggle if they come from an international market, because the banks we do tend to require a little more collateral, as Dr. Antoine pointed out, and that is because a limiting factor in our environment, right? We don't have the same levers that can be pulled. So to follow on, we think there is a need for more of that type of risk taking in there, which will actually make the senior secured debt products even better. So I think that's just a little bit of a backdrop when you talk about how we approach agriculture. How have we been approaching agriculture? Historically, we have looked for assets. All right. Now there has been a changing focus, realizing the investments being taken on by our other stakeholders and understanding how we can structure some of these nascent industries or new projects that need a little bit more of a runway. So we're taking a significantly more collaborative approach to how do we structure the senior secured debt portion of their capital structure. How do we work with them on the equity? And how do we ensure that the other key stakeholders are looking at maybe some risk mitigant tools? And that has come in the form in Guyana of direct investment by the government, or looking at risk mitigation through climate assessment tools with our reinsurance partners and the DFIs, and looking at it holistically to say, how do we get everyone in the room? How do we really generate a solution that lasts. Because the last thing we want to do as a bank is claim on collateral.
Yeah.
So how do we build this properly from the start that just doesn't tick only our boxes, but ticks everyone's boxes so that we get it moving. One of the questions touched on ESG, and ESG is definitely growing in importance for us. We do have an ESG policy internally, particularly around how we extend credit. And how do we incorporate the ESG measurement tools? The E is always the easy part, no pun intended on the ESG, but the S and the G are as equally important, right? And our view to that is how are we incorporating better S and G measurement tools to ensure that we're hitting those back to the same point. How are we developing that right solution to go forward? But I guess the takeaway on how we approach agriculture now is less about the collateral, more about what is the business proposition. Do we have commitment from other stakeholders to ensure that we all together can make this happen?
Excellent. Well, the move right back to you, Monica, on kind of limitations in what you don't do. As much as a lot of people are asking questions, they want to, how do they connect to you? But also, do you invest directly in entrepreneurs or through governments? Is one question out there for you. How about your ESG policies? Certainly heard a lot of that in your introduction, but you might want to be specific. But also, I think we want the listeners to understand everyone here is not a one size fits all. And what are the type of things that you focus on? And then maybe we can have another round of who are the other players and where are the gaps with those other players that one should be thinking about. So over to you, Monica, to cover some of those items.
Okay, perfect. First of all, we do invest directly. We don't do it through the government. Actually, it's directly with the private sector. However, we're a small bank. Well, we have a large number of assets, but small number of people. So actually, investments have to be of a certain size, and companies have to be of a certain size. In the Caribbean, we're a lot more flexible in having smaller investments of up to $1 million and up. And but then the the companies or the projects have to have the enough equity to be able to at least match that ticket size or more. And so we do work directly with corporate to be able to lend to them, but at the same time, or we work with anchor companies so that with the help of those anchor companies, we can get to the supply chain and provide both economic transfer and knowledge transfer to the supply chain to be able to get to smaller size farmers or suppliers. At the same time, we work with financial intermediaries and funds to be able to get to smaller size companies and smaller size projects. So that's another thing. And then overall, so that would be corporates, financial institutions, and at the same time, we recognize that there's a need of other infrastructure projects, energy projects, water and sanitations, logistic projects, the rural infrastructure required within the countries. So we do projects within that scope too with other investors, and those projects can be private public projects, and but it's all the infrastructure required as part of the competitiveness that the region needs. Like, for example, we've been investing in ports in the region. In terms of energy, we've been actually, we recognize that the cost of energy in the region is high, and so we've been investing in some energy projects for corporates directly for auto consumption, and then adding the use of batteries, and then there, since it's related to climate change and to to being able to decarbonize companies and overall the region, we have concessional resources available to be able to make those projects more bankable and have use of batteries, for example. And then that's in terms of financing. So, and then we have all the products that I mentioned before that can be used and be adapted to what is required. And then on the other hand, we have advisory services that can either be provided with the financing or can be provided upstream to prepare a financing, because that's where we see like a gap between what the project is, what it requires, and the financing structure that it requires. But it needs additional work to be able to have a bankable project where not only IDB Invest can finance, but also other commercial banks can participate, or other funds and impact investors or investors or strategic investors that can bring in both knowledge and also resources. So we provide also upstream advisory services in several themes. For example, like if a company would want to implement a solar energy for auto consumption, first of all, they would require an energy audit to be able to bring down to make the use of energy more efficient, to bring down their consumption, and at the same time then see how they can implement a renewable energy project such as a solar project. What would be best, land, rooftop? So how to prepare a project and be able to get a cost efficiency in the project to be implemented. So and especially in the Caribbean, we are providing upstream advisory services that will later become a project, right? And then in terms of the environmental, social, and governance, the ESG aspect, what we do is we use international print standards, and then we make a gap analysis of where a company or a project is at, and then what it requires, what's the gap between the international standards and what they have, and then formulate a plan to be able to get from point A to point B. And then we also provide resources to be and support to be able to come from A to B. So that is our approach. It doesn't mean that from day one companies have to be complying with international standards, but they have to have the will and capacity to be able to advance and develop those aspects.
That's great. I'd like to just both take some of this information and give a little bit of a perspective of what we have seen, and take a minute or two, if I could. 17 Asset Management is named for the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we look at both our advisory and our investment effort as a design approach. The banking world, and coming from the history of being a banker, it's very comparable based. The world of banking is based on industry comparables, and you compare each thing to a certain industry when you do the finances around it. Well, there's two parts of that. If models are created out of comparables, you always get what you always had. That's one thing. And then the second is the Caribbean is very interesting, very wealthy from an opportunity standpoint, very wealthy from a potential of innovation. Innovation doesn't lend itself to comparable financing. Innovation lends itself to design thinking, much the way West Coast and Silicon Valley is. There are the billionaires of the world who are trying to get a rocket to a new planet. well, what's going to happen when we get there with all the billions that they spend if we can't kind of get a circular economy in an island that we all love to frequent? And so the opportunity of taking innovation in value chains, creating responsible and circular economies, creating new agri-tech and new indoor farming and new refrigeration and transport. The Caribbean area could be the R&D for so many places around the world, especially the archipelago nations of Asia. And so the opportunity and the connectivity with the trade starting to happen in Africa is gigantic as well. There is a wonderful trade mission going on right now. So that opportunity of funding, and for you all in the crowd, I think also the rest of the day, we're going to have examples of Dr. Patrick Antoine said. There's the soursop, and there's the turmeric, and there's the spices, and there's the chicken. These are important parts of our daily lives around the world. And there is the opportunity to look at new innovation when it comes to it. And the ability to bring in capital and expertise in the same way the big firms do in the West Coast. They don't just give money to unicorns. They give money in support. That's what Republic Bank is doing. That's what IDB is doing. But it needs a different approach when looking at funding. I'd also say there's all kinds of opportunities in co-ops. This is a small business market. So we need to look at roll-ups, co-ops, looking at fishing co-ops, looking at indoor farming and maybe co-ops and different approaches versus kind of create a business in one location. So there's royalty type of funding that could happen. There's room for financial innovation that could get behind the businesses. But the other side is we do need to catalog those businesses and put them into different approaches. And we also need to reach out to those who put their hand up as investors, family offices, impact investors, pension funds, whether they're major institutions in Ontario, teachers, or Canada that would be open to coming in for a port at the right time with the right impact and partner with Republic or IDB Invest, or whether it's an impact firm that wants to look at food and work with co-ops, or an investment is parting with your money. It's not a requirement of the returns. There are investors that have a return objective that are equity and higher returns. There are nonprofits that have an investment criteria, which is maybe to get their money back or a little bit more, but to create a social mission. Everyone falls into those different areas. We need to catalog them and bring them into different sleeves. You heard Monica and you heard Stephen and Patrick all talk about blended finance. We need to actually get the different blends of finance and tag them and understand how they can work collectively across these supply chains. That's what we're 17. We're very happy to be working with FAO, looking at their value chains and thinking about the outreach. That's what this event is about. That's why working with CPSO and doing the same thing and thinking about that in CARICOM. And then being able to go back and approach Republic and approach Monica and say, can you come into this capital stack to bring a whole bunch of other investors? So as we move, I hope, from the Caribbean being a place that we are talking about the problems, the debt, the issues, to be one of innovative abundance, and knowing that there is an opportunity to create new capital stacks that put the ownership in the hands of the indigenous people from the Caribbean, create tremendous examples that other people can copy around the world. But we in the finance world have to do the collaborating. We have to reach out and work across the way In the same way, in the when we were sitting in this room prepping, Stephen and Monica were getting together, and the first thing they were saying was, okay, well, let's co-invest on some of these things together. Let's get together in October. And Dr. Patrick said the same thing. Yeah, I've got some businesses for you. Financing is a team sport. And you entrepreneurs out there recognize there are different types of funders that maybe we figure out the right financing team to get around you. Maybe when we hear about the marketplaces in Trinidad today, think maybe it's not a marketplace, maybe it's a incubator of businesses selling at that marketplace that might drive new investments that turn into digital opportunities, and then listen to the next speaker, which is a digital market. And maybe there needs to be a incubator fund around some physical marketplaces. So we don't know the answers, and we're not going to get them if we think in the way we've always thought. But what is so exciting about the Caribbean, what's so exciting about the people on this panel, is they know the marketplace. They know what is happening. And I'd just like to thank you all for this great session, and just ask each of you to take a minute to close, and then we'll move on to another financing mechanism that we're going to hear from and talk about a certain approach that they are funding. So we'll start with the way we started. We'll go with Dr. Patrick to start, Monica, and then Stephen. But we are now finished with our time. So let's keep our closing comments to 1 minute or less.
Yeah, 3 very quick points. The private sector in CARICOM has really gone global. We have successful Caribbean firms in Central America, in South America, in North America, and Europe, in the agri-food sector that are doing well. What we need is to have those firms be given the same support and space in CARICOM so that they can do for the CSME that which they've been able to do outside of CARICOM. And the learning by doing effects will certainly mean that we're going to have some incubators set up so that small and medium-sized firms can learn what these successful firms have done, to go global and to be sustained over time. And I dare say this is where finance comes in, because I want to make the plug for the last point that you made. Yes, we need an incubator fund. Yes, we need incubators. And I'd certainly want to be able to discuss that with you so that when we get to the Bahamas at that investment forum, we really can be talking about having connected a number of these pieces. And that's really, what we want to say. We're happy to have been here. The Caribbean is open for business. And with us returning to 2019 levels for tourism, the opportunity's never been brighter. Thank you.
Thank you. Briefly, Monica and Stephen, please.
Yes, well, thank you very much for the panel and for the participation. And actually, I'm just going to answer quickly a question about startup services and incubator. Within the IDB group, we have IDB that serves the public sector, IDB Invest, the private sector, and then we also have IDB Lab that would that is the R&D of the IDB group. So business incubator, startup services, all start up there. So they can contact IDB Lab. And then in terms of IDB Invest, we have identified priorities, areas to support within the Caribbean. The Caribbean is a very important mandate for us, and we are very interested in and motivated to be able to support the region and be able to finance projects there, and not only projects but also advisory services and preparation for projects too.
Thank you, Monica.
Yes, sorry.
And, thank you for being here. Fantastic. And Stephen, last words.
John, thank you. Just to reiterate to Patrick and Monica, we need to see this continued commitment by all stakeholders for this to be a success. So let's get in the room. Let's continue. Let's keep the energy up. And let's keep pushing. Republic Bank is here to be a partner along this journey, and we know we cannot be the only banking partner, and that's okay with us. The more we push together, the more these initiatives can be overcome, and the better our communities become. So, thank you again, John, and let's keep up the energy.
Yeah, thank you. And join us in the next session as well. We'll see you all there. Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Yes.
all
Thank
of you.
you. Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.